Or welcome to the Writer Reads A Planet's Ransom, Ransomeers Book 1. This is Chapter 13, Time to Go. The heritage did not come. In the morning when I checked the computer, my tasks remained the same, and all the dots on the map seemed intact. Just to make sure, I touched each one, reading the name and the status. How come I can't contact them directly? I asked. We locked the communicators. You have to be within 2 feet of each other to activate them and verify their voices. Why? There were factions in some of our earlier groups who used direct contact to hunt each other down. We barely intervened in time. What did you do? We put them through a period of re-education and then relocated them to different worlds. Distance and time, coupled with a few generations of social engineering, meant they were much nicer to each other when they met again. They'd probably forgotten who the other side were. Well, not entirely, but they didn't immediately recognize each other either, and that helped. I bet. The dispensing drawer rattled as though several heavy packages had landed in it. Supplies for 3 or 4 days, depending on how you use them. Sleeping bag, eating equipment. Cooking? No need. You should reach a pod at the end of each day. Overnight inside it, and the pod can do the cooking for you. Then why do I need rations? Lunch. Snacks. I opened the drawer and pulled out the rations. There's an awful lot for just 3 or 4 days. You'll get hungry. There were quite a few pairs of socks. Always keep your feet dry and clean, the voice beyond the computer said. You won't get far if they become infected. I didn't want to know what he meant by that. Figured I could always ask him if something went wrong with my feet. By the time I had the food, water, eating utensils, fire starters. You were going to have me use tamska bark and vuran wood to start the cook fire. Circumstances have changed. By the time I'd packed everything in the pack and added the computer tablet, maps and first aid kit, the sun had risen. It is later than I'd like, the computer complained. You were the one who insisted I needed all this stuff, I told it, tapping the pack closed and listening to its seal. You should use the straps. Why? If the seal fails, the straps will keep everything inside. Fine, I said, and did up the straps as well. When I was done and dressed and ready to go, the computer said, I will seal this pod until you return. Stepping out from my sleeping quarters into the larger room beyond, I felt a moment of regret. This would have made a nice home. Are you kidding? Part of me screamed. This is never going to be home, not while you're away from your family. I pushed that part of me down inside. I could scream about my family later. Right now, I had to rescue my classmates and get them to safety. I'd been lucky. If I didn't move fast, the heritage might hurt someone I knew, and then I'd have another reason for screaming. I didn't want to have another reason. Being kidnapped, shot and stranded so that a bunch of aliens could convince my government to join their stupid federation were reasons enough. I didn't need to add a friend getting eaten to the list. I really, really didn't. I pulled the visor down over my eyes. Pod open, I said, and stepped out. Pod close. Come on, computer. The computer remained silent as I climbed up the staggered rise to the top of the Sapphirite Cliffs. This time the map on the inside of the visor had another use beyond mapping my progress for Exploration Level 1. This time it served to show me which direction I should take in order to get to Davo's pod. I hoped he was all right. I was coming off the ridge, making my way around the other side of the Sapphirite, when another thought came to me. Did Davo's computer tell him about the heritage? I asked. It seemed to make sense. Anyone willing to break the rules in order to hide the pod might, just might, have told its passenger why. The computer didn't answer straight away, so I assumed whoever was on the other end of it was able to visit the other computer voices and talk to them. Its response proved me right. David Shanahan's handler says he did not tell David of the danger. The boy was sound asleep on landing and did not wake until later. Handler? You have more important things to worry about. Like what? Like convincing Davo to either relocate to your pod or to accompany you in your search for the others. That won't be too hard, I said. And it wasn't. Not really. Davo wasn't in his pod when I arrived. I knocked on the outer door and then called out, "Davo! Hey, Dave!" When I received no response, I leant against the pod's outer wall and glared at my surroundings. As I did so, I began to notice a few things. Firstly, Davo had managed to get a bit further along in his survival chores than I had. He'd built a cooking pit, which was covered by a metal lid held down by stones. "How come I didn't get one of those?" I asked. "You did not complete survival level 1. I snorted. "Yeah, well, you know the reason for that." "And you did not need a cooking fire cover." "I might have. And when you did, one would have been issued." "Where is he?" I asked. "Who?" "Davo." I gestured round the camp. "I don't see him." "Have you checked inside the pod?" "What am I supposed to say? Pod open?" And I didn't need to ask again, because the wall I'd been leaning against gave way to thin air and I fell inside the pod. "Hey!" The computer stayed silent. Smart machine. "Davo?" I called, but I could see that the pod was empty. "He's not here. What task was he working on today?" "Exploration level 1. The response sounded strange, coming back in 2 voices. "Who is this?" demanded the new one, followed by the second. "Iskrev, this is Laurie, my ward." "Ward?" I made a note to ask about that later. I did not warn him she might be coming. "You had no cause." "You're acting quickly. You know why?" "Yes, I will recall him. He is not far." Davo returned a few minutes later, and he was furious. "Game's over," I said, and told him about the heritage. "You're freaking kidding me." "Nope. I have to find Sulin." "She's third on the list." "What do you mean?" "I mean you were the first, and there's another pod on the way to hers. We'll pick them up on the way." "Sure, if you think she'll be okay in the meantime." I tried to be understanding, but I really just felt angry. I didn't care how much in love he was with Sulin. He had no right to just ignore everyone else. We're getting the others first. I could go on ahead. I could go on ahead. You just have to give me the map." "No," I said. "We don't split up." "Who died and put you in charge?" "No one died, but I guess I'm in charge because I can be trusted not to let my heart rule my head." "Oh, sure. And if it was Mitch out there, I'd bet you'd be going straight there." Davo was ready for a fight. I glared at him, fighting back the sudden urge to burst into tears. Something must have shown on my face. "What?" I swallowed, got myself back under control, felt my mouth sliding to misery as I said, "He's last." That stopped him. I watched his jaw drop, saw him close his mouth, and then think before opening it again. "Why?" "Because—" I felt my voice catch, closed my eyes, and took a breath. Davo's computer chimed, and then something heavy thumped into his dispensing drawer. Excuse me, I have to check that." I nodded and moved to the front of the pod, looking out over the camp. "You've done well," I said. "Thanks," Dave replied, but I could tell from the tone of his voice that he really just wanted me to be quiet. I wandered out of the pod and walked past the fire to the shelter of the trees. That way he'd have no reason to say I distracted him. It also gave me a chance to check the map and work out how we were going to get to the next pod. I didn't recognize the name Blossom Halliwell. Weird name. Probably had artistic parents. A dark-haired, coffee-skinned girl with dark brown eyes came to mind. She'd liked pink and yellow and ruffles. Lots of ruffles. I wondered what she'd done to be selected, because I was starting to think there was a distinct pattern to the ones who'd gotten pulled out of line. Even me. I mean, I know they grabbed Cass first, but I don't think they'd ever intended to take her. The more I got to learn about this setup, the more I got the feeling that me and Mitch, both, had been set up to go. Cass was never going to be a problem for the lizards, but Mitch and me? Well, we'd both questioned their authority, and it was no secret that Mitch wasn't happy with being dumped with us kids. Apparently that hadn't been part of the agreement. It had been something that had come up. I'd said he'd seemed surprised to be staying, and he'd said he'd been told he was on escort duty, and we'd had a pretty big row about what kind of soldier took the kids of his country, his own country, to be paid as ransom, and he'd tried to explain that that wasn't what he'd been told. We'd gotten through it, eventually. Remembering that conversation had me thinking of Mitch all over again, and I couldn't help but call up his location on the visor's map. His pod was okay, its status undisturbed, and I breathed a sigh of relief, and that was when Davo came bolting out of his pod. I heard him call, "Pod, close!" and then heard him run toward me. "Quick, quick," he said, running past me and into the trees. "Computers say we have to hurry." "What?" I asked, but I was already pushing myself up and away from the tree I'd been leaning on and hurrying after him. I could think of only one reason why the computers would be telling us to hurry. It didn't take me long to catch up with Davo, but I didn't try to stop him or do anything stupid like asking him where we were going in such a hurry. For him to be moving this fast, I guessed he knew exactly where he was going, and if the computers wanted him there fast, who was I to slow him down? There'd be time enough for explanations when we got to wherever he was taking us. "Almost there," David panted, taking a sharp turn around an outcrop of boulders and splashing his way into a shallow rock-bottom stream. "Almost there, almost there." I didn't know who he was trying to reassure by repeating the call, but I didn't care. Almost there beat "oh God, oh God, oh God" any day. I tried not to think of just how wet my feet were getting as Davo ran up the stream bed a good 10 or 12 feet before scrambling up a tumble of rocks on the other side. "Here, here, here," he said as he slid over the top of the rocks and disappeared from sight. I didn't slow down. The desperate fear in his voice was pushing panic buttons in my soul and leaving the hollow coldness of fear in the pit of my stomach. But something else was happening too. I could hear it. I could feel it. Something was coming, but I couldn't hear it or feel it well enough to tell what it was. I hit the top of the rocks, only to find myself faced with a sea of bushes. "Dave," I whispered. "Dave!" I called again, my whisper as loud as a shout as I could make it. "Down here!" And I caught sight of movement at my feet. My brain conjured up pictures of thorn scorpions and vuran beetles, but I ignored it. There was no time. I crouched down and then slid under the bushes to where Davo was waiting. It was surprisingly spacious down here, the leafy branches rising in a tangle above us, leaving a crawl space beneath. But David didn't lead me further under the bushes. He led me round the base of the rocks and then into a hollow passage which became a cave. "Dave!" I protested, but he didn't stop. He just kept moving into the cave and then into another passage at the back. "He said we had to get as deep as we could," Dave whispered back. "He said we had to get too deep for the scans to find us. He said we had to hurry." He was almost running, ignoring the potential danger posed by the rough floor and half-seen walls, and then I realized that we could see, that the GGSs we were wearing were shedding a faint diffuse light. "He said we'd know when to stop," Dave continued. "He said the GGS would tell us." "Okay," I said. "It's okay, Davo. Just keep going. I'm right behind you." He kept going, reaching a small intersection where 3 tunnels met and turning unerringly to the left. I wanted to ask him where he was going, but didn't have the breath. He explained anyway. "He said we had to get at least as far as the glow pools. He said the shallow cavern would be better. He said to hurry, hurry, hurry." I heard his voice fade and then a muffled sob. A second sob followed and then a definite sniffle. Behind us I heard the air shriek. Around us the air moved as though someone had pushed it. Dave moaned with terror and paused. I shoved him forward. "The glow pools," I urged. "We have to get to the glow pools." It was enough to get him moving again, although the soft whomp that followed almost stopped him in his tracks. I'm not sure if it was the shudder of earth beneath our feet or me screaming that got him moving again, but he reached back and grabbed my arm and pulled me down another tunnel and around a corner. "Don't stop!" he yelled. "Don't stop, don't stop, don't stop!" I didn't. I kept running until the ground surged beneath me and knocked me off my feet. It did the same to Dave as well, and we both bounced off the walls, tumbling around a bend in the tunnel and then bouncing into a large pool of water. "Oh God, the fedges!" Dave screamed, scrambling to his feet and grabbing my arm. "Get up! We've got to get out of the water!" I got up and I pushed my way through the water. It wasn't deep, but it was deep enough to slow us down. It went from being almost up to my knees to halfway at my thighs, but that wasn't what motivated me. What motivated me were the shapes that stirred at the far end of the pool, the glowing shapes. in the glowing water. They had long snouts that reminded me of crocodiles, and long bodies that reminded me of sharks, and fins that ran the full length of their backs like eels, and they were coming our way. No wonder Dave was flailing his way through the water and jerking me after him. No wonder he was moaning, "Oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God," over and over again. I would be saying the same, except I wasn't looking anymore. I was focused on the far bank, focused on the hard, crunchy feel of rock beneath my feet as the water descended down to my knees, my shins, my ankles. And then I was on dry land, and I was pulling Dave to a halt as another pool opened up on the other side of the rocky rise we'd just climbed. "This way," he urged, taking the lead again and running along the ridge to the right. "This way, this way, this way." I thought about having a talk with him about keeping calm in an emergency, but he was actually doing okay, all things considered. He pulled me into another tunnel, one which looped sharply to the left, and then descended in a jagged curve until I thought we were passing beneath the glow pools. I hoped the glowfedges didn't dig, and ran after him. The air surged around us, pushing against our backs and then pulling at our clothes as it blew in the other direction. "What was that?" I gasped, just as Dave pulled me around another corner and into a wide cavern with a low-hanging roof. He slowed to a walk, but didn't let go of my arm until he dragged me up onto a broad ledge of rock that ran like a balcony around the edge of the cave. It was obviously a familiar perch, for he sank down in a sudden heap and leant his head back against the wall behind him. I descended slowly beside him. "Here? The computer told you to come here?" "He said the Heritage were coming. He said they would kill us both." David turned to face me. "What's happening, Laurie? What in the world is happening?" Davo never swore, at least not where I had ever heard him. "The Heritage are a bunch of aliens who don't believe we should be allowed to live. They think we should be wiped off our planet so the lizard Evennatch can take it for themselves. But the Evennatch aren't like that." "No, most of them aren't, but it's just like back on Earth. There are some humans that don't want to give refugees anywhere to stay, or who think black people don't deserve jobs, or that whites shouldn't stay in countries where they weren't born, or that people of the same gender shouldn't be allowed to marry. Well, there are some Evennatch who think they should just take the planets they need as their own because the people on them are too stupid, backward, or slow to advance and don't deserve to keep them." "But that's not fair." "Sounds familiar, though, doesn't it?" He stared at me and then ducked his head. "Well, yeah, but..." "But what, David? It's not okay for humans, and it's not okay for Evennatch either. And most of them believe we deserve a chance." He relaxed a little bit at that, and then he said, "But why are they here, on this world?" "I think they're here to make sure only Evennatch get to live here." I watched his face and realized that he'd been right. The GGS had told us where we were safe. We just hadn't noticed. I could see Dave's face as clear as day. Could see the rest of the cavern too. The cavern was pretty big, but its roof was awfully low. Dave's face held an expression that was a mix of horror and fear. "And what are they going to do about it?" I guessed by they he meant the voices on the other end of the computers. "We didn't get that far. The guy on the other end of my computer told me I had to come rescue the rest of you. It's really screwed up my progress in the levels." "I don't think they matter anymore." Dave climbed slowly to his feet. "I think we'd better hurry if we're going to get to the next pod in time." "What about Sulin?" "My computer guy said I had to trust you, that everyone's survival rested on you." "Did he say why?" "No, I just figured that Sulin is part of everyone, so the sooner I help you get to the others, the sooner you can get to her." He glanced at the roof and then back at the tunnel door we'd come through. "And I really want to get to her before the Heritage do." Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit like. If you want to hear more, please hit subscribe. And I'll check you later. Take care out there.